let's use the subtract blend mode for increasing contrast to make your images pop with color. We are going to start from scratch, so let me move the current adjustment to the parked group at the bottom. Now with our image as the top layer, the first thing I'm going to do is to make a duplicate of the image layer. Next, I need a fill layer, which can be added using the layer menu. The fill layer will need to be set to blue, but as I used the color before, it is already filled with blue. I will explain in a minute why the fill layer needs to be blue. Now that I have my fill layer, I can move the duplicated image layer on top of the fill layer. I'm going to change the blend mode of this image layer to saturation. By doing this, the saturation of the image will be applied to the blue layer below. So basically, the bright blue areas are where the image had high saturation, and the darker areas are the areas in the image with low saturation. This gives an interesting result which we can use to blend down. To do that, I'm going to group these two layers first. The blend mode I'm going to apply will be the subtract blend mode. But before applying it, let's do a quick investigation in the subtract blend mode. The subtract blend mode subtracts the RGB values in the top layer from the values in the bottom layer. This results in an image where the RGB values will always be lower, or in other words, a more darker image. The theory of the subtract blend mode is quite simple, but let's have a look how this works with color. I will use this color wheel and subtract a color by using a fill layer in subtract blend mode. When we subtract the blue color, notice how all the blue is gone and we are left with red, orange and green. The interesting fact is that the remaining colors are the opposite colors in the color wheel. You could almost say that when you subtract a color, the resulting colors are the colors between the two angles in the opposite section. We can also see this when we subtract red. We are left with green, cyan and blue. This works for the primary colors RGB. If you have additive colors, like yellow, then we are only left with the opposite color, blue in this case, as now both red and green are subtracted. Hope that this makes sense. As I play around with the fill color, notice how this theory holds up pretty nicely. Knowing this, let's return to our starting image. I hope you now understand why I have chosen blue as the fill layer initially. Subtracting blue will result in a much warmer image where the red and the greens will become stronger. The image we have right now has strong blue values on the places where there was strong saturation. And when we use the subtract blend mode, it means that the strong saturated values in the original image will become warmer. This creates an interesting contrast in the image. As mentioned, the blue color works very nicely most of the time, depending on the image. For fun, let's change the color and see its effects. As you see in this image, the subtraction of blue creates the best result. Now, this effect is probably too much, and as you might have guessed, I'm going to use blend ranges to make the blend better. From the source, I'm going to lower the effect of the highlights. This will make sure that the bright values in this image do not have a strong effect. That looks already much better. Next, I'm going to do the same with the underlaying layer, meaning the original bright areas will not be affected. The result is that we protected the bright values and applied the subtract predominantly in the shadows and the midtones. That looks pretty cool. The before and the after. Now, there are a couple of things we can do right now. As we have set up the blend ranges, an option would be to fine-tune the color being subtracted. By controlling the brightness of the color, we can control the strength of the effect. We can also try to change the color. But at the end, as you noticed earlier, blue has the best result. But then again, it really depends on what you want to achieve. If you want a more greenish look, setting the fill color to purple will work much better. But let's keep it at blue in this example. Another option will be to lower the opacity to control the strength. From my experience, a value around 60 to 70% creates a natural blend. The final tip here is to apply a color balance. I want to add more red to the image so that the stones in the house are more dominantly visible. Remember that we are subtracting values, so to get more red, I have to move the slider to the opposite of red. When I move the slider all the way to the left in the shadows, we get a nice red color in the houses, making this photo really pop up. After we apply this color balance, you might want to adjust the fill color to really fine-tune the end result. Here is the before and here is the after. Pretty awesome. Let's look at some other examples. This method also works very nicely with food photos, as most food photos will have a lot of warm colors with green. Have a look at that, just amazing. The only difference here compared to the previous photo is that on the blend range of the group, I have not lowered the blend in the highlights for the underlaying layer. When I do, you can see why. Having the yellows show up works very well with the image and the vegetables used. But if your food ingredients are more white, then you probably would need to lower it. Let's look at this example with the cat. Here I have used green as a subtracted color. It was already quite a warm photo with contrast, so by subtracting the green we increase the blues and the red, which works very well for this image. The blend range applied is the same as our first example. In this final example, notice how applying this works quite well for this image. A suggestion for you is to also experiment with the blend mode of the group. For example, the reflect blend mode works even better in my opinion, as the lavenders look amazing. Also, this image can handle different subtract colors. By just playing with the color, we can get different results. We can also use the theory I explained earlier. Suppose we want to have more green. To do that, I need to subtract the magenta or the purple color. This will give me a good base to continue the editing. So to finish up this image, I will make another copy of the original image and then blend that in with linear light, which creates this super saturated image. A little bit of adjustment in the fill and the opacity combined with a selective color adjustment at the end, and we get this amazing result. Pretty awesome. Hope you liked this video and learned something new. Thank you for watching, and until the next video.